All right. So, like I said, we will get back to what's happening overseas in terms of actual battles and the fighting that's going on, you know, all the blood and guts and gore, all that fun stuff. But first, we're going to talk about the war at home, basically what the U.S. was going through and what was going through our heads as we are, one, preparing to send people overseas after we have officially decided to join the war, and what's happening afterwards when people are leaving in swarms to go to Europe to fight for the, you know, the precious fragility that is the United States, among other things, okay? So the war at home is a super interesting conversation because not only, as we've talked about, is there a lot of technological advancements that's happening on the battlefield, there are a lot of happening off the battlefield as well that's going to make communication, among other things, spike up, basically. That we have a lot more talking to each other, a lot less in the dark when it comes to war. We've been blessed and cursed with the fact that we can see what's happening on the battlefield during that time and having that information with us, basically. Thank you. Okay. So this all starts, basically, we've decided to enter the war. We've received the Zimmerman telegram, or we've, decoded the Zimmerman telegram. We have officially decided to go to war. The first step in deciding or to prepping to go to war is developing a war economy, okay? A war economy is very, very different than your day-to-day economy or like your non-combatant economy, okay? Developing a war economy basically means developing a system in which we can support ourselves while, one, supporting the military heavily, two, losing a lot of the workforce through, men leaving for war, and three, having to surplus, cut back to have enough to send overseas. Yes.
In these times, would taxes be raised?
Ever so slightly. We would be more inclined to raise taxes on like imports or exports than we would to tax our own people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, another thing, because there were so many men at war, didn't they have to employ women when they normally wouldn't?
We will get to the women's roles in just a little bit, but yeah, that's kind of where it's going with it. Yeah. Yeah, Sean. What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
So like, let's say that we ship out a bunch of, I don't know, any product, Starbucks cups, okay? We ship out a bunch of, I'm not saying during this time. We ship out a bunch of Starbucks cups to a different country. We're gonna make sure that they pay more for those Starbucks cups because it'll help us pay for everything. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so developing a war economy starts with the creation of this organization called the War Industries Board, okay? The War Industries Board determined what products different industries would make, where the products would go, and the price that they sold them for. Yeah.
Another question about import.
Yeah.
It's mostly import and export to your allies, right?
Yeah.
So what's the point in taxing your imports and exports if they're your allies? Because that would be taking from your allies to import.
We would basically call it a paycheck. Like, yo, we're going over there to help you. You got to pay us somehow. So we're going to raise those taxes a little bit. Yeah.
But really, we're not going for anything because all of those taxes are just going to fund war.
But we also have a large market in Asia that's not a part of this. So that large market in Asia is also going to help.
Does that have to do with opium prices?
It more has to do with Japan has, China's has a falling dynasty and Japan has a growing colony. So they don't have time to deal with anybody else. They're basically they're focusing on themselves. Okay, so the War Industries Board determines what products the industries would make, where the products would go, and their price. So let's take, for example, the textile industry, the people who make clothes, okay? The War Industry Board would decide what kind of clothes they made, how much would get shipped where, including overseas, and the price that the military and civilians would pay for those clothes, okay? This would to be making sure that industries and different businesses weren't taking advantage, of different price points, like making a lot of money off of war, because that's not something you want to do. But it would also make sure that the United States military is getting the stuff that they needed without having to, privatize, basically. They could still use public people, right? Along with the food administration, or excuse me, with the developing of a war economy, we've got people who are taking care of industries like products, things, but we also have an administration that's taking care of food. It's the Food Administration, which would eventually become the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA. The Food Administration is headed by our favorite Iowan, Herbert Hoover, okay? The Food Administration looked to boost food production and asked Americans to conserve food so that we could ship a lot overseas. This is where we get the introduction of different types of programs like Wheatless Wednesdays and Meatless Tuesdays and Porkless Thursdays, et cetera, basically conserving the food or conserving certain products so that we could ship it overseas. We also see a small emergence of people producing their own food, but we see much more of that in World War II. And we also see an increase in farmer production. So farmers across the United States are going to dive headfirst into overproducing to make sure that our soldiers had enough food. Okay? Farmers were working their butts off. They were buying new equipment. They were making sure that they had everything that they needed to, produce what they needed, basically. Right? Also part of developing a war economy and also like what the War Industry Board would do was things like this, trying to get people to buy bonds. You buy a little bit of this bond or you buy a little piece of the military, your money goes directly to our budget to help us win the war. Eventually, we'll sell it back to you and you can have your money back, okay? If not more, yeah. If you can't enlist, invest. That's how you make a war economy. Yeah. This specifically, no. This specifically, no.
Well, like war economy, war itself.
Oh, war pays for itself.
Really?
War will put you in debt, but then boost you higher than you've ever seen.
Okay.
Which is why we get the roaring 20s after World War I and baby boomers after World War II. Because everybody is super rich and super happy. Maybe a bit too happy. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Need tissue? Oh, Jesus. If you need to step out, just go for it. All right, so that's how you develop a war economy through a variety of different ways, but the War Industries Board and the Food Administration is going to really help with that, okay? All right, what's also happening at home, other than developing a war economy, is that, so we have, how do I introduce this? So the Zimmerman telegram really flipped a lot of people, right? We used to be a very, very isolationist country that we wanted nothing to do with all of this war and we wanted nothing to do with the Great War in general. But then the Zimmerman telegram comes out and we're like, hey, maybe we do want to get involved. But there are still people that don't want to be involved. Not everyone is on board with going to war, right? Just like Ryan was saying, hey, wars are expensive. It takes a lot of money to go to war. I don't want my husband and my son and my brother to go off to a foreign war and possibly kill themselves. War is not what we want, right? So not everybody is on board with going from the majority of the population that used to be isolationist. Yeah. Enlisters to casualties, I don't have a percentage, but overall total deaths for the United States was 150K-ish.
Like how many people lived out or were in the war?
It's very high, but I don't have a percentage right now. I'd have to look that up later. Yeah. The death rate, though, the total casualties after World War I for the United States was about 150K.
And was that like a lot compared to everybody?
Yeah, or no, that was very, very little. Germany lost 4 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Soldiers?
Yes.
Or just
well, everybody.
They also lost a lot of civilians, right?
Yeah.
During World War I, like what was the male to female
ratio in the United States?
It's always about 50-50. It's always about 50-50. Yeah.
After the war, there was
After the war, it's probably like 52-48, but it's always about 50-50. Yeah. Right now, it's like 51-49 women. Like there's just ever so slightly a little bit more women in the United States than there are men. All right, so not everybody's on board with going to war. Some people refuse to cooperate with these different things that the War Industries Board was doing or the Food Administration. So I'm not going to buy bonds. I'm not going to do wheatless Wednesdays. I'm not going to do meatless Mondays. It's just not what I'm going to do, okay? Some people who were unfortunately drafted into World War I fled the country. They said, peace out, I'm going to Canada. I'm not going to war. We made it abundantly clear that we don't want to be here and that we can't be here. I'm not going. So they fled, which is a federal crime, but only if they catch you, okay? Some people ignored their draft calls. They just ignored going to war in general. Again, if they can't find you, they can't make you go.
Muhammad Ali was drafted.
Yeah.
And
he pieced out. Muhammad Ali was drafted and he tried to peace out, and that wasn't going to work. So then he changed his religion to Islam, and then he became a conscientious objector. Okay, so a conscientious objector are people whose moral and religious beliefs forbid them from fighting in wars. So let's say that I have a religious belief. It doesn't really matter which one it is, but let's say that part of my religion says that I am a pacifist, that I should not be fighting in physical contact, or that war is bad, essentially, that conflict is bad. And I get drafted, I can get out of it by saying, no, I'm not going to do that because my religion tells me no, okay? To us today, that sounds very, very reasonable, basically, that, hey, if your religion tells you not to do something, then don't do it, right? But during the time of World War I, when the majority flipped to very, very heavily in favor of the war, the people who were found out as conscious objectors, or people who fled, people who did not like the war, were ignored, harassed on the street, humiliated, even beaten in some instances. It's obviously no comparison to, many other people or many other things that are happening in the United States at the same time. But these people who were very much against the war and very much objected to going were humiliated. They were treated as second class. It was basically a conversation of, well, why don't you want to stand up for your country? Why don't you want to help us win? Don't you love your country? That's part of that nationalist rhetoric, right? That nationalism is all about being patriotic and loving your country and doing anything for your country. That's part of our main causes of World War I. If you don't want to participate, you're looked down upon. Yeah, Sean.
It's not like World War I. Some people didn't know what other people wanted to do.
Yeah, they were. I must say, there were a lot of people that were very conflicted, and people just didn't understand the difference in opinion. Yeah. Drafting age, 18. Yeah, 18. When you guys turn 18, I literally mean guys in this instance. When men turn 18, you get a letter in the mail that's from Selective Service. If you don't register for Selective Service within a year of your 18th birthday, you can be charged. No, not treason or anything. They'll just basically come after you and be like, hey, you have to register.
They haven't used it recently.
No. It's basically like, it's not the draft. When you sign the paper, you're not actively agreeing to go to war, but they have to have a tracker of you if we do a draft. We haven't done a draft since 1942.
Yeah, I thought we did it.
Oh, yeah, Vietnam. Sorry. Yeah. We haven't done it since 59 or 60. Yeah. Yes.
We lost.
Oh, we lost, but then they fought really nasty, so we tried to fight nastier, but then we ended up killing our own guys.
We tried fighting off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they fought.
Yeah, I know this because my
Napalm.
Huh?
Napalm.
Yeah, they used this gas, and my cousin's dad died because he fought in
Vietnam is really nasty. If you want to talk about people who were objected to a war, Vietnam is the way to go. People hated Vietnam. It was awful.
They use this gas and then I guess react fast enough to the gas. And then some of the guys got left behind because the others fled and they ended up like
It's either napalm or Agent Orange, one of the two.
I think it was
Agent
my
Orange.
uncle died from it.
Napalm.
And then my cousins, because he came back, because when they were sick, they got some back. And then he saw the gas on his clothes.
Oh, gosh.
Really
Ugh. All right. So although we are not on board altogether, or though we cannot come together and agree on whether or not we should be in war, there is one thing that we all agree upon during this time at home, throughout the entirety of World War I, and that is that there is a major anti-German attitude that's sweeping across the nation. That we see Germany from the moment that World War I outbreaks and that they've mobilized and kind of pulled the trigger on a lot of different things, that Germany was the bad guy, right? That Germany is the enemy and that German things, German people, et cetera, should not be trusted, okay? So there's a huge anti-German attitude that went down to some ridiculous levels, I'm gonna be honest, that swept across the country. So for example, they stopped teaching German at schools and colleges. They renamed sauerkraut Liberty cabbage. That one's my favorite.
That sounds disgusting.
Well, sauerkraut is disgusting, but Liberty cabbage is cringy.
I thought I like both of the names.
So sauerkraut was no longer sauerkraut, it's Liberty cabbage because it can't be German.
When did it go back?
Like after World War II.
So basically-
We kept calling it Liberty cabbage.
So basically, when we see that to now.
Huh?
So basically, that year at the end to now.
Not until now. There's a couple people like,
I'm
I
just-
bet you there was some people that like maybe served in World War I that called it Liberty cabbage for the rest of their life, but eventually we switched back over.
Liberty Cabbage is kind of a strange name because saying Liberty Cabbage makes it sound like it's okay to call it whatever you want it, right? It's literal. So call it
Liberty
sauerkraut.
cabbage. Liberty cabbage.
We switched from liberal cabbage to sauerkraut,
Yeah.
back to sauerkraut after we stopped caring about Germany and more about
Yeah.
Russia.
That's fair. All right, so the other things that are going to happen that are attributed to this anti-German attitude, bars and saloons took pretzels out of their bars,
That's racist.
like as a like as a food item, because pretzels, like these soft pretzels that we normally see, are Bavarian pretzels, which is German. German classical music, so Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, other German classical composers were removed from orchestral sets. You weren't allowed to play German orchestral music. And then kind of like the worst part of it, so all these are kind of like ridiculous, right? Like Liberty cabbage and taking pretzels out, et cetera, et cetera. But German Americans, those immigrants who had immigrated in years and years and years ago, or who were fleeing their own country from destruction, were treated awful in the United States. They were taunted for being German. They were beaten in the streets. And there's on multiple occasions where German Americans are killed just based off of suspicion.
Where does that
Yeah.
like, you know,
We don't like other people. Yeah. Huh?
Why does that sound like the Germans would get on the beach when they like one take on when they were taking
I don't understand your question. Can you do it one more time?
Why does it sound like the Germans are like the Jews from Hitler?
Oh, not in any sense. We got a long way to go from there. We basically, the United States has a long history, just like Nora said, of not accepting a lot of people, but we are nowhere near what's going to happen to the Jewish population in World War II. Yeah, true.
Wasn't there like a German American political party that was getting really popular
Yeah.
before World War I and then after
Yeah.
World War I?
There was, it was basically, it was like a offshoot of communism, and it was getting super popular, but then Germany and World War I started, and we were like, and that was kind of our starting of the relationship between us and communism.
So it was like primary primarily German.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, Ryan.
We call ourselves Americans, and yet at that time we hated Native Americans, who should be called Americans, and we should be called post-British.
Post-British. I like it.
That means after British. I'm not that smart. Basically, saying we feel British.
All right, so we've got this anti-German attitude that's sweeping across the nation. And it's not only with the general public that this is happening. The administration of World War I, also agreed that there was a type of, what's the best word for it? There was a duty that we needed to uphold when it came to keeping our country safe, okay? Like I said, with the increase in technology in the weapons realm of World War I, there is also an increase in technology in the public realm, okay, in the consumer realm. There are so many stories, or there are so many instances leading up to not only our involvement in World War I, but throughout World War I in general, where we have spies, basically, roaming, not only the United States, but other countries in Europe.
Is this when Russia started their hacking business?
World War II. Yep.
Well, I mean, we use satellites a lot in World War II, right?
Yeah.
And Russia did too.
Russia and World War I was still like,
Mhm.
and it had a revolution during that time.
Would you just write the name?
Write the names and then try and like condense what it's saying. This is like directly from the acts, but if you want to condense what it's saying, or if you want to break it down, I'm going to break it down too. So just give me one sec. So some new legislation or some new pieces of information that the government felt was very necessary to pass. In 1917, we passed something called the Espionage Act. The Espionage Act prohibited obtaining information, recording pictures, or copying descriptions of any information relating to the national defense with intent or reason to believe that the information may be used for the injury of the United States or to the advantage of a foreign nation. Basically, if I catch you stealing things, taking pictures of things, being suspicious, and I believe that you are going to use it against the United States or give it to a foreign nation to use against us, I can put you in jail, no questions asked. Yeah.
Is that still in play?
No.
But
There's a lot of like back and forth. So like we bring it in now, it goes away for a little bit. It comes back during World War II. It goes away after World War II. It comes back during Vietnam, but technically it's still in place. Yeah.
well, yeah, we're thinking during the war, there should be some laws in place
Yeah.
for that, because otherwise lives will be lost.
Yeah. There is a huge debate over these two in particular, and I'll go through them, like both of them real quick before I get into it, but there's huge debate over these two when it comes to the First Amendment. So 1917, the Espionage Act, like I said, if I catch you doing anything suspicious, if I find you copying documents or recording pictures or being sus, okay, I can put you in jail, no questions asked. And you don't have to have a trial either. I can put you in jail until the war's over.
That is,
Yeah.
Why don't you just put
Nope.
a reverse card?
Huh?
If they catch you, why don't you just say they
Reverse card, be like, listen, you're spying on me, spying on you. You go to jail. Yeah.
Most of the time, we have right to court, right?
Most of the time, but in like this, especially in the Sedition Act, especially in the Espionage Act, we basically say, no, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If you're a spy and I can prove that you're being suspicious, you get no rights. Traitors to the United States do not get rights.
So let's say like hypothetical situation, we do go to jail, and then like whatever after the war or after it's over,
Then you can have a trial. Yeah.
So you would go to trial and whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depends on the situation, but basically the thought process here is traitors are committing treason, you don't get rights, which is in our Constitution. So we can stay with that basically. So 1918, on top of the Espionage Act, we also passed the 1918 Sedition Act, willfully uttering, printing, writing, or publishing any disloyal, profane, scurrilous, I don't know what that word means, abusive language about the form or about the form of the government of the United States. So basically, if you are speaking about the United States by saying something bad, if you're being suspicious about your words, what you're talking about the United States, if you're being disloyal to the United States based on what you are uttering, printing, writing, publishing, et cetera, I can put you in jail, no questions asked.
So you wouldn't be
Yeah.
talked about.
Yeah. If I'm in 1918 and I am in the middle of New York City and I just stand in the middle of Times Square and goes, the United States sucks. World War I sucks. I hate it here, and I publish it in the paper or something like that, they can take me to jail because I sound suspicious and I wouldn't get a trial until it's over.
That sounds like me.
Yeah.
If I were a spy or working against America, I wouldn't so obviously state my hatred.
Oh, for
the
sure.
United States. Like,
Yeah.
I'm more likely to say that in public, in Times Square, now, than if I.
That's why me and Sally are such good spies, because we know how to keep it under wraps.
It's also against people that like try to come in and then publish stuff bad about
Yes.
the United States to get like public support down.
Oh,
The
yeah.
thing is, though, how crazy would the government go if they, so, you know, the Capitol race?
Yeah.
How would that, like, play out? We can't arrest everybody that was raised in the Capitol, but if that was during a war and they ran to the Capitol, how would they handle that?
That would be interesting. They'd probably go about it in about the same way that happened right now. Like they would eventually just start finding people. I think it would be harder. Like we found people through TikTok when it happened in January, right? So like obviously that's not an option in 1917, right? But I think the process would still be the same. I think they would be a little bit more forceful about basically just being like, well, you look like the guy, jail time. You know what I mean?
Actually, if it was during the war, they'd probably start shooting people.
Right, yeah.
Do you know what the penalties were for somebody that was caught?
So if I was caught, let's say that like I posted, or I shouldn't say posted, published in a newspaper my disdain for the United States under an anonymous name, and they eventually found out who I was, I'd be taken into custody. And since I technically committed treason against the United States, I would skip all local and state level jails. I'd go straight to like a national penitentiary, basically, or like a national scale. Sometimes I would get a trial, sometimes I wouldn't, depends on what I said. Like I said, if I published something that was just like, God, the United States really sucks. You know what's awesome? Communism. No trial, straight in jail. You know what I mean? But it just depended on what would happen. Almost always jail time. In some way, shape, or form, almost always jail time. And then if you were ever let out, you know, fines, fees, et cetera, there were people that were banned from entering the United States ever again. So, a lot of different things.
If you were a spy from an opposing country and you somehow made your way into the United States,
Yes.
what would be the
If you somehow made your way into the United States, again, they would take you into custody. They would question you for sure, try and get you to know what you know, or try and get you to tell them what you know, and then keep them in custody for however long you wanted, and then eventually send them back to their home country with, like, you can't ever come back.
Would there be threats received to the other country? If you
Yeah.
didn't tell them, would there ever be situations?
So,
where you'd be paranoid there was-
if we're being 100% like, this is exactly how it's going down, I'm not getting caught. I'm eating a cyanide pill and dying before I get caught. Every spy has a cyanide pill. You chew it, you're dead. Yes.
If spy gets caught like mid-war, they're either gonna get killed, put in like federal prison,
Or they're gonna kill
interrogated,
themselves.
or
Yeah.
kill
How did they
themselves,
find
Yeah.
out that they had a spy?
or have like a trade with another country with one spy for one spy.
Yeah. That's also very possible. Trading spies. Yeah, Sean. Last question, then we gotta move on.
So that, so the spies didn't have that, so what would they do?
Huh?
So if the spies got caught, if they didn't have it, what would they do?
Oh, they'd be taken into custody. They just have to basically try and keep their mouth shut.
I would have said that you said you have her name.
Okay, last one, then we gotta move on. Go.
Oh, it's not a question, but it's just like,
Okay.
if you're a spy and you're going to another country and you get caught,
I'm sorry, but you suck.
You're a bad spy. Exactly.
Is there a thing where if you're about to get assassinated as a spy and they call your country, won't they just like leave you? Be like, no, please, no.
Yes.
You don't know.
Again, if you got caught, you're a bad spy. I don't want you on my team anymore. You're on your own.
They're probably trying to assassinate the spy.
All right, so, all right, other than spy stuff, all right, so the Espionage and Sedition Act, the only thing I'll say left about this basically is that other than the punishments that could come with this, as we're kind of finding out, or as we just had this conversation about, it's very, it almost seems hypocritical that the Espionage and Sedition Acts are something when it kind of, or it feels like it violates our First Amendment rights, et cetera, okay? But during this wartime economy and during this wartime America, things are very different, okay? Including the fact that there are a bunch of changing roles when it comes to minority groups and especially women entering World War I. So let's start with women because the majority of the change is going to come from this minority group. Women are going to have to basically step up to the plate to take jobs and do work that was previously done by men. We're not going to see this on as large of a scale as World War II, but it is still going to be a large percentage of women entering the workforce, taking up production jobs, taking up jobs that had been left behind. Because again, with a war economy, we're not only overproducing for the sake of getting everything overseas, we have to find out a way to make up for all this lost workforce, okay? A lot of women, other than taking jobs that were previously done by men on the home front, they often enlisted as nurses and went overseas with them. So, you know, I don't really want to send my son to war or my husband to war or my brother to war, but maybe I could go with him and be the nurse, okay? The women's roles in World War I with the keeping up the slack or picking up the slack in the job force, with enlisting and basically earning a bunch of recognition in the military, not only as nurses, but as spies, as other things. This directly relates back to the fact that they're going to win their right to vote when the war is over. Immediately after the war in 1920, women are going to earn the right to vote. We'll talk more about that next unit with women's right to vote, but it's a direct correlation that women had earned a ton of respect by their participation in the war effort and are going to earn the right to vote for that, among other things that have been happening about 100 years. Yeah.
But even that there's still a lot of sexism, right?
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah.
And then also for African Americans, the government purposely send them more to the front line because they were black.
Sometimes yes, but it was also, there was a big struggle. So speaking of African Americans, Ryan asked the question basically, African Americans are enlisted, are they sent to the front line? There's a big struggle here because the thought process would be like, oh, you know, they're African American, you know, racist government, we're gonna send them to the front lines so that, you know, they're quote unquote disposable, right? That's an awful thing to say and I recognize that, okay? But the other side of it is that African Americans were sent less into war because it's not that they were seen as, quote, disposable, it's that they were seen as, quote, incompetent. That why would I send them into the front lines when, you know, they are incompetent? Again, I completely understand that those statements are absolutely unacceptable. That's why I'm kind of quoting them because that's what it was happening, right? African Americans, though, many enlisted and many were drafted into World War I. Although there was a heavily held perspective that African Americans were incompetent, that they couldn't serve in that kind of service, a lot of people still enlisted to try and prove them wrong, basically. Like the same thing's gonna happen in World War II as well, where we have a ton of people who enlist and prove themselves as very competent military strategists, and, you know, over exuberate or like over exemplifying anything that anybody thought that they could have done. Unfortunately not getting recognized for it though, okay? During World War I as well, with kind of the change in atmosphere, especially towards the end of World War I, we are going to encounter something called the Great Migration, where a little over 1 million African Americans moved from the Deep South and the South in general to the north, to the west, to a variety of different places to escape racism and get jobs. Part of this is because there are jobs to be filled because of World War I, but also because they are seizing the opportunity created by the boom after the war. More on this next unit though, okay? And then last but not least, a group that is very little talked about or is very hardly ever talked about when it comes to World War I and the role that they play is Mexican Americans. There are a ton of Mexican Americans that are living in the southwest portion of the United States that had either moved to the southwest portion or had immigrated into the southwest portion at the turn of the century that uphold the agricultural jobs in that area and help with the surplus of food. That this portion of the United States in the southwest area is producing a ton of food and is one of the main producers or one of the main areas sending food overseas. And Mexican Americans hold a lot of those jobs in that area. So there's changing roles all across the country for women, for African American, for Mexican Americans, for lots of minorities across the country. Because wartime economies and wartime businesses create a lot of differences. We have to work with what we're given. And this is how we decide to do it. Okay. All right, so if I remember correctly, where we're heading. Hot. You guys are getting me flustered. All right, so with World War I and with our roles at home, right, and all of these new things that are happening, support is still low, right? There is enlistment, but not a whole lot. There's enough production, but not enough. There's a lot of people who are still adamantly opposed to this war, okay? So the United States government kind of has to look and say, all right, what can we do that's going to help us drum up support so that we can win this war, right? We need more bonds, we need more people, we need more support. What can we do to drum up this support to help win this war, okay? And the answer comes with the overwhelming production of this new strategy of propaganda, okay? The government's advertising propaganda is going to come in waves throughout the World War I effort, okay? I know when we talk about propaganda, we talk a lot about World War II propaganda because it's like the most recognizable. We've got a lot of good stuff coming out of it. We spend more time on it than we do in World War I. But World War I is when we start to see the emergence of these industries or of these government sanctioned things pushing out propaganda at high numbers. Yeah. Yes, please. I've been opening and closing it all day because I open it and then you guys get cold, so then I have to shut it, and then it gets hot and I open it and I shut it. It's only a little bit of time. We'll be fine. Okay, so the government had decided basically that we need to drum up more support, that we're not getting enough people involved with this process. We need to do something, and propaganda is the answer. What we're gonna go through today before we end up is we're gonna go through, oh God, that felt so good. Oh, oh it felt so good. I got two, but they're not on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about what propaganda is by definition, how it's used, and the different techniques that the United States government is going to use to convince people to buy into this war economy, okay? So let's start off with why we need propaganda, okay? So we need propaganda, or we do this, because we have an agency that is created called the Committee on Public Information, okay? The Committee on Public Information taught the public about the causes of the war, so they put out information in newspapers, radio ads, et cetera, about how the war was doing, what was going on, et cetera, okay? Part of this process, or part of this cooperation between the government and the CPI was it was supposed to convince people that the war was necessary and that it was a good thing to be in the war, and that whatever's happening is good, right? They made pamphlets, they made posters, they did, you know, a bunch of different things to get the word out, okay? with the main goal being to gain public support. All right, so we're gaining public support through a variety of different things, pamphlets, posters, et cetera, okay? We're gonna look at the strategies that they use, like I said, on those pamphlets and on those posters to gain the public support, okay? But first we have to talk about what propaganda actually is. Why is it different than actual advertising? Why is it not as, what's the word I'm looking for? Informational as normal newsletters or normal news sources, okay? You know, what's the difference, basically, okay? So propaganda, the definition, there's actually two meanings, okay? The actual definition of propaganda is publicity put out by a government or organization to promote a cause or idea, okay? If I am, I'm the coach of the esports club, right? If I put out an informational thing that I post all over the school that says, hey, the esports club is really awesome. We're really good at playing games. You should come join. That's propaganda. I am an organization promoting an idea that esports is cool and that you should join, and I'm putting it out to the public. That's propaganda, okay? But propaganda has often meant to lead misleading publicity or misleading information to the public. Yeah.
Most of the time it's both, right?
Yes, a lot of the time it's both, so that I'm promoting an idea or I'm promoting an organization, but it's not always necessarily true, okay?
You could be
So-
esports, pizza every week.
Yeah, right. Like if I'm the esports coach and I'm putting out misleading information like, yo, we're back to back state championships. We have pizza every Friday. Come join us. That's not true, right? I'm misleading the public, but also talking about my organization. Okay. What do you mean? It's misleading. So for example, we can see things that are both like there are a bunch of ones from World War II, like I said, that's like, riding alone is riding with Hitler. They're trying to get you to carpool to save gas, but riding alone is like riding with Hitler. That's not true. That's misleading. You're not riding with the ghost of Hitler. You're just riding alone, okay? So there's a bunch of different things like that, okay? Another one that we could use is literally the one that I have up on the board. Soldiers eat babies.
Is that literally
No, it's fake. It's fake, but it shows how propaganda can be really misleading by also promoting a cause. So soldiers eat babies, that's a fact. There's a snap that goes after that. Think of the children. Join Team Demo Man today and make those monsters pay. So Team Demo Man, whatever it is, basically a memeing thing from Reddit, I think, is trying to get you to join their organization and promoting the fact that they're going to make soldiers stop eating babies. That's a good thing, right? Do soldiers actually eat babies? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Find all the service names.
Yeah.
It depends on what the cooks give them.
Stop. So do soldiers eat babies? Absolutely not. Does Team Demo Man still producing propaganda trying to get you to do that? Yes. Okay. Yeah. So there's two different definitions of propaganda and two different ways to look at it. Okay. But at its core, propaganda is publicity or something, some kind of information put out by the government or an organization to promote a cause or idea. So originally, if we're looking at World War I propaganda, we are trying to promote that the war is good and that the war effort needs help. Okay? Is it always 100% true? No, and that's where we get the double definition. Okay? All right, so when it comes to propaganda, there are different strategies that you can use to put out good propaganda, and this is where we'll end today. Yes, okay. So this is where we'll end today. Is there are propaganda techniques that you can use to make your propaganda really good, okay? Or there are 4 that we see not only throughout World War I, but throughout World War II that we are going to consistently use to spark support in the United States, okay? Number 1, vilification of the enemy. Vilification of the enemy, and what I want you to think of when you think of that, vilification sounds like what? Villain. You're making the enemy look like the villain, okay? Vilification, villain. That's how you put that together, okay? Vilification of the enemy is basically making your enemy look like monsters, aka soldiers eating babies, right? We can see this a lot. We make German people look like King Kong in a bunch of different ones. We see this all the time, that the enemy is awful and horrible and is a monster, and that's how you should see them, okay? Number 2, patriotism / emotional appeal. They normally go hand in hand, okay? Patriotism being things like, your country needs you, or not, excuse me, I shouldn't say your country needs you, okay? Patriotism being like, you should support this because it helps out our country. You should be proud of your country and the men going overseas, you should support them. Yes, guilt tripping is a good way to put it. Yeah, if I have a propaganda picture and it's got a puppy, I have one somewhere on here, a puppy laying on a soldier's casket saying, because you didn't buy war bonds, that's an emotional appeal. It's making you feel bad and guilt tripping you for not buying war bonds. You might have killed somebody, right? That's absolutely not true. That's over the top, but it's a way to do that. Yeah.
Or like making our soldiers look like heroes.
Yes.
If you join, you'll be a hero.
Yes. Like and making our heroes or our soldiers look like patriots, look like heroes, look like awesome people that you would want to help. Yes.
Is the puppy alive?
Yes.
No. Oh, then
Oh,
I
then
then if the puppy's dead, then
No,
that's all my
the puppy's alive, but it was the soldier's puppy, and because you didn't buy war bonds, the soldier's
Well,
dead.
the puppy's mine now.
So number 3, I still need your attention, please. I don't care if you've stopped writing. Number 3 is recruitment, okay? This one right here. I want you for the U.S. Army. Your nearest recruiting station is here. Recruitment. I want you to join the war. Uncle Sam needs you. If you don't answer the call, you're a communist. Yes.
Why doesn't let us from Captain America when he's smaller?
It is. I mean, it is kind of. We use this poster throughout all of history when it comes to Army recruitment. It starts in World War I, and we still use it today. Yeah. Okay, and then last but not least, number 4 is war support. That you need to do your part, right? Buy war bonds, plant a garden, conserve, go participate in Meatless Monday, whatever, right? Do your part, and what we're asking you to do. So if you can't do any of the other things, right? If you can't enlist, if you can't buy war bonds, if you can't like straight up murder people, okay? Do your part on the other end. Become a nurse, donate blood, donate metal scraps, right? Do whatever you can to help at home so that we can have support over there. Those are the 4 different propaganda techniques that we're going to use most frequently: vilification, patriotism, recruitment, and war support. We're going to explore those a little bit more tomorrow with some examples, but otherwise that's it for today, okay?
So technically, they just, for recruitment, they make it a special.
My favorite.